Today we're going to talk about multiplying radicals. You'll see here I have 4 radical 15 times radical 6 plus radical 5. Now I've already drawn the lines that we're going to multiply here. When we multiply radicals, we multiply coefficient with coefficient and radical with radical. So I'm going to take this whole first term times this whole first term, but piece by piece. So the coefficient times the coefficient is going to be 4 times 1. Now the 1 here is invisible, which is why I've written it in red. It's not really there, but I added on just to help me remember that it's there. So 4 times 1 is 4, and then radical 15 times 6 is 90. So I should have 4 radical 90 for my first term. Then when I multiply by the second, you can see I get 4, because 4 times 1 is 4, and 15 times 5 is 75. From there, I have to simplify my radical, so I have to find a perfect square that goes into both of these. 90 has 9 and 10, and 75 has 25 and 3. So I have 4 radical 9 times 10, plus 4 radical 25 times 3. 9 is a perfect square, and 25 is a perfect square, so I pull those out. When they come out, they multiply, so I have 4 times 3 radical 10, plus 4 times 5 radical 3, which gives me 12 radical 10 plus 20 radical 3. And since I don't have any like radicals, I can't combine anything else, and that's my final answer. Let's do another one. Number 2 here, we have radical 15 times 2 radical 10 minus 4 radical 6. And again, I added the 1 here just to help remind me. I'm going to take this whole first term times this whole first term, but piece by piece. So coefficient times coefficient and radical times radical. 1 times 2 gives me 2, and 15 times 10 gives me 150. So I have 2 radical 150 minus this term times this whole term will be 1 times 4, which is 4, and 15 times 6, which is 90. From here I just have to simplify. 15 has a perfect square, or 150 has a perfect square of 25 and 6, and 90 has a perfect square of 9 and 10. My perfect square is 25, and my perfect square is 9 here, so I'm going to pull those out, and when they come out they multiply. So I have 2 times 5 radical 6 minus 4 times 3 radical 10. 2 times 5 is 10, 4 times 3 is 12, so I get 10 radical 6 minus 12 radical 10. And I do not have like radicals, so I cannot combine anything with those. Here's another one. Number 3 here. It's 2 binomials, so I have to use the good old method of foiling. So I have 7 plus radical 6 times 1 plus radical 6. Now again, I'm going to multiply term by term, but within that, piece by piece. So within each term, I have to multiply coefficient by coefficient and radical with radical. So this first term is 7, and this first term is 1. I added the radical 1s and the 1 for the coefficients in red here again, because those are invisible, and just help remind me what I'm doing. So 7 times 1 is 7, and radical 1 times radical 1 is radical 1. And then I'm going to take my outside term, for FOIL here, my outside term, 7 times 1 here is 7, and then radical 1 times radical 6 is radical 6. Plus, my inside term here, 1 times 1 is 1, and radical 6 times radical 1 is radical 6. Plus, on the outside, 1 times 1, my last term here, is 1, and then radical 6 times radical 6 is radical 36. Now I've boxed the radical 6's here because those are like terms, so I can combine those. When I combine them, I'm left with just the 7 over here, and then these radical 6's combine to give me 8 radical 6's, and then radical 36, that's just the square root of 36, which is 6. And then I see I have 7 and 6, that's a like term, those are both constants, so that gives me 13 plus 8 radical 6. We'll do one last one. Number 4 here. Again, I'm going to have to use the FOIL method, binomial distribution. I'm going to take this first term times this term here. Negative 7 times 4 is negative 28, and then radical 1 times radical 1 is radical 1. And then negative 7 multiplied by this outside one here, I know it's going to be a negative, so it's going to be negative, and then my coefficient times coefficient is 7. Radical times radical is radical 3x, because 1 times 3x is 3x. And then my inside one here, coefficient with coefficient, 4 times 1 is 4. And then radical 1 times 3x is radical 3x again. And then our last term here, coefficient with coefficient is 1 times 1. And then radical 3x times radical 3x is radical 9x squared. Now I just have to simplify. This just stays a negative 28. These have like radicals, so I can combine those. Negative 7 plus 4 is negative 3. And then 9x squared, well, those are both squares that can be pulled out. The 9 can come out and this x squared can come out. When the 9 comes out, it becomes a 3. And when the x squared comes out, it becomes an x. So I have negative 28 minus 3 radical 3x plus 3x. There's nothing else I can combine, so that's my final answer. And that's how you multiply radicals.